Hey, what's up, everyone? It is Lucy here. I am joined by Cam.
Hi, Lucy. How you doing?
I am well, and I am very excited to dig into this Hearthstone video.
It's been a while since we've chatted Hearthstone
It has
in
been.
video form.
It's been far too long. So what we're going to be looking at today is basically a broad overview of how Hearthstone, how the game has changed since the League of Explorers came out.
Yep.
Because obviously it has changed very significantly. And it's something that I can feel when I play.
Yep.
But
yep.
it's not something that I've necessarily been able to sort of
Have
isolate and identify.
Have you noticed that a lot of your games now go to fatigue?
Often.
And people are running really greedy decks?
Yep.
Yeah.
And just, as you said to me earlier on in the week, it feels like a much slower game now.
That's exactly it. Yeah. I mean, there are still some very fast decks being run, and we'll have a look at one of those in particular. But the reality is that, Face Hunter just really isn't a thing anymore. And
Thank God.
I laugh whenever I see them because I now just generally beat them. And it's great, so sucked in to all those people playing Face Hunter.
And broadly, why do you think that is? I mean,
it's because of cards like Reno Jackson.
Right.
I mean, Reno Jackson has
single-handedly
changed the way people have constructed decks in this game.
Right.
Because you've got like a full heal. And it also means that fringe cards have come back in because you're creating decks with 30 separate different cards in them. And also, there's cards like Bran.
Yeah.
So you could, heal bot for 16 health, which is huge. So there've been a couple of cards that, Reno in particular, that kind of promote like a much more controlling kind of game.
Right. Right.
And there've been less cards that have really boosted the aggro style of play.
Okay.
So yeah, and like right now, this is a lot of variety on the ladder.
Yep.
You don't really always know what you're going up against, but I thought it might be interesting to do an overview, and this isn't really meant to be in any kind of depth, but for people who are kind of casually interested in Hearthstone, how has Hearthstone changed since League of Explorers finished?
Mm-hmm.
What are some of the kind of archetypes that people are running? Like, are there new deck archetypes, and are there archetypes that have kind of come back into vogue, but with a bit of a League of Explorers twist?
Cool.
So what we've got here is 9 deck lists.
Yep.
And I thought we'd just kind of run through a bunch of the archetypes and just take a look at the cards in a kind of quintessential deck list example.
Okay.
To get a sense for how they might play.
I just want to quickly mention that this is going to be very helpful for me because I'm just looking at this deck listing here, and I've been playing the first one only.
Yep.
So I really need to understand what some of these other decks are that I'm playing against, because yes, any Finn, which we will go into now, that is the single deck that I've been playing since League of Explorers.
And this is a fun one. I mean, I have very mixed feelings about Murlocs, I have to be honest.
I think a lot of people do.
Yeah, in the old days when you'd come up against a Murloc Warlock and they can just swarm the board, it just was just really frustrating. And unless you were kind of teched against that, there wasn't much you could do. So we're going to have a look at a couple of other Murloc decks that are a bit more all-in. What's really interesting about this one is it's a Paladin deck geared around Murlocs, and Murlocs are kind of your win condition, but it's actually just the mid-range Paladin. It doesn't run that many Murlocs, but the Murlocs that it does run are very carefully chosen.
Yeah,
and that's so that you can get your Anything Can Happen card off for burst damage, basically.
And what's amazing about Anything Can Happen is that I love saying that with a straight face, like that pun.
Yep.
What's amazing about this card is that it can trigger twice, obviously. So once, maybe all of your Murlocs have been destroyed, but then you can bring them back again.
Yep. And then you have ridiculous burst.
But then you've just got these ridiculous numbers, and it doesn't happen all the time. I've got to say, the one thing about this deck, just quickly click on Anything Can Happen again.
Some people only run one of these, by the way, but I think you need two, so you can definitely draw into it. It sucks when you've got two in the early game.
Oh, yeah.
But, that's just the nature of having 2 cards that are quite specific. That's very much a late game card.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is a late game card, so you do actually have to play very carefully before then, because often, as you said, there aren't actually that many Murlocs in this deck.
Yep.
And you don't want to just run them just in order for them to die, and then you know, in order for you to be able to play that anything can happen card, like, you've got to be smart. Because I think when I first started playing this, that was my logic. I was just like, okay, whenever I get a Murloc, I'm just going to play it. It doesn't even matter. And
you can do that to some extent, because, like, they're generally pretty useful. Yeah, sometimes you try and save them to kind of combo them to buff. I mean, you know, to buff one of your other Murlocs. Like Bluegill.
Bluegill's great.
Yeah, but I mean, if you can wait till turn 5, then you've got, you know, 4 burst damage just out of the gate, and then you've still got a 3/3 minion on board. But the good thing is that your early game is still very much geared around, like, what a mid-range paladin wants to do. You know, you Zombie Chow into Shielded Minibot, into Muster for Battle. You've got, like, a very strong early game anyway.
Yeah.
But yeah, because you only have 5 Murlocs, you don't always draw them. You might draw your Anything Can Happens first. It's, you know, this is not a top-tier deck, but it is a fun deck when that combo happens. And so the way the combo works is you need to basically play out your Murlocs and have them die, so that they can then be resurrected by Anything Can Happen. And the way it works is you've got 2 Bluegill Warriors, so they're both charge. You've got Old Murkai, which is also charged, which has +1 attack for every other Murloc on the battlefield. And then you've got your Murloc War Leaders, which don't have charge, but they buff up all your other Murlocs. So your Bluegills basically turn into 4 attack, and then your Old Murkai turns into what, like, it'd be +3, +2, so 7 attack.
Yeah.
I don't know if I've got those numbers right, but it's a fair bit of burst damage just out of the gate.
Yeah.
So you're basically just focusing on trying to stay in the game, trying to control the game as much as you can, and getting your opponent low enough that you can turn 10, play this, and then just, you know, one turn kill them.
And again, like, I mean, I've experienced a couple of times, as I said, when I have triggered that card twice, and it's so ridiculous. I mean, I'm talking like the old Murkai being at 19 damage, like such ridiculous numbers.
And it's bizarre when you are in the mirror match as well, because you're not too sure, like, what you should do. I had a great game against a priest the other day who stole my Anything Can Happen with his Thought Steal. And so then he proceeded to play it and dump a bunch of Murlocs on the board, and I killed the ones that weren't going to buff my Murlocs, and then I played my Anything Can Happen, and because I killed some of his Murlocs, I then had a full board of Murlocs, and so it was the biggest backfire. He should just not have played that card.
That's amazing.
Anyway, so that's the kind of mid-range Murloc Paladin.
Cool.
So next up we've got, and by the way, the names in brackets here are the streamers and pro players who are either experimenting with this is their deck list that they're using at the moment, or have been using recently, that I've pulled from. So this is much more of an all-in Murloc. I mean, you look at, like, Murloc Tinyfin and you go, oh, it's like a wisp, but a Murloc. So on its own, it has no value, but when it's comboed with all these other Murlocs, it can suddenly get buffed up, and it buffs other things up. So this is just absolutely full of Murlocs. I played a couple of games with this, and when it works out for you, you can just swarm the board and just overwhelm your opponent so fast, because, you know, you are let's see, you've got Murlocs that are gaining attack, that are buffing each other, you know, just all throughout the deck. So it's just nothing but synergy. You just have to know when to kind of unleash.
What does every Fin is awesome? Another great pun.
That's,
okay.
Yeah.
Right.
But you get a discount on that if you have a bunch of Murlocs on the board. So you could theoretically play that relatively early. So yeah, you're just trying to overwhelm your opponent as quickly as possible, basically. And then, you know, finish off with, like, Doomhammer and Rockbiter Weapon. And I think it's also interesting that, like, most Shaman decks these days are running Sir Finley, and that's largely because you can replace your hero power with a much better one. So for this deck in particular, you would obviously be looking for the Warlock hero power, so that every turn you can tap to get more cards into your hand. because you're just concerned about, basically smashing your opponent's face before they can kill you. So this is quite a fun one, but it's the old school Murloc deck
that everyone gets
irritated by. I mean, everybody gets irritated by Murlocs in general. I'm actually kind of surprised that Blizzard went so all in with Murlocs with this expansion, because it's such a dangerous area. But I guess, there's all these tribes, and you have to kind of get them to a point where, there's enough mechs to do some cool stuff, and there's enough Murlocs to do some cool stuff, and
absolutely.
It's just the nature of the game.
Absolutely. I mean, are they, we had this conversation the other day. I still don't think they're as irritating as Grim Patron. I don't think anything is as irritating as Grim Patron.
Well, at least with Murlocs, I mean, anything can happen is a one-turn kill kind of idea.
Yeah.
But with this one here, I guess you can fight back against it, and you can try and just, if you've got taunts in your deck, if you've got some good board clears, you can just shut them down and just keep them from actually doing enough damage and then come back into the game. Whereas Patron, the problem with Patron was that it was just out of nowhere for an empty board, and that you just get killed. Okay, let's have a look at this Reno Lock deck. Now this
is really interesting. There are no doubles.
There's Molten Giants.
Oh,
Molten Giants are the only double in the deck.
Wow.
So that's the only one you have to pay attention to.
Yep.
You just have to make sure you've got a Molten in hand or have played a Molten before you use Reno.
Yep.
But a lot of these Reno decks are literally 30 unique cards. Although the Reno Freeze Mage decks have a few doubles because they're really vital to the deck list, and you're drawing through your deck so fast that you can kind of keep tabs on it and know when you can play your Reno. But there's just so much in here. You've got tech cards that are not seen in the game all that often outside of Arena, like Mind Control Tech. And then staples like Twilight Drake and the Giants, obviously, and Dr. Boom, Sylvanas, Thaurissan to reduce the cost of your cards.
I would find this one quite intimidating to play, because I think when you have decks that are mostly doubles, you understand the rhythms and you understand exactly how how it's all shapes out.
Yep.
Whereas this, I wouldn't even know where to begin.
No, and that's the thing, is you just have to have good kind of base skills, understand when you should be trading, how that you're right, like it's not consistent.
Intimidating.
It's not consistent in any way.
Yeah.
But that's what actually just makes it really fun.
Yeah.
Because you can't really rely on drawing into the specific thing you need. You're just trying to draw answers in kind of general, or ways to control the board in general. It's a really fun deck list. I mean, the whole Reno lock, or the whole Reno as the basis for a deck has been tried in a bunch of different classes.
Yep.
So this is Warlock. I mentioned that there was a Freeze Mage one, but then Creparium was playing a Fatigue Warrior deck. Life Coach was playing a Reno Paladin, which I tried and was not very good at. So there's a bunch of different ways. I mean, the very first deck that I built when that card was available was actually just like a Tempo Mage.
Right.
Because I figured there's enough spells for a lot of that stuff still to work. And it did okay, but I think the only reasons I won a couple of games was because people just didn't know what to expect.
Yeah. Which I suppose that's how it works in the other way. Is that I wouldn't know how to deal with this, facing off with this.
Yeah. Well, you don't know what's going to come.
Yeah.
But the great thing here is that you can kind of get low enough to play one or more Molten Giants and then just Reno yourself back to full health. But then you've still got Antique Heal bots. You've still got one, and you've still got an Earthen Ring Farseer. So you've still got kind of traditional heal in there plus Reno.
Yeah.
It's a fun list to play. All right, next up, Malagos Warlock. So this has been kind of in and out of vogue a fair bit over the lifespan of Hearthstone. The basic idea is you get to the point where you can play Malagos, and then you try and just burst your opponent down.
Right.
With direct damage spells that are then boosted by 5 damage. Yeah. So obviously the introduction of Thaurissan is great, because if you can get a tick off your Malygos and some of your spells, then you can play a bunch of stuff in one turn, as opposed to maybe playing a Malygos and a Soulfire and then hoping the Malygos survives till the next turn. So new in this kind of iteration of it is Dark Peddler. And Dark Peddler is an awesome, awesome card for this purpose. I mean, in general for Warlock it's a good card, but for this deck in particular it's really good because you're discovering a 1-cost card, and class cards are weighted like 4 or 5 times more heavily than neutral cards are.
Yeah.
And Warlock has some really, really powerful 1-cost cards. So you've got Power Overwhelming, you've got Soulfire. So you're basically hoping to draw into more direct damage to kind of fuel your Malygos turn.
Yeah, right.
The other interesting thing about this particular list is that you've got some dragons in here as well. I mean, Malygos is obviously a dragon, but you've got things to take advantage of the fact that you've got dragons in there, like, you know, you can taunt up.
Yep.
You can do some kind of burst damage to kind of keep the board under control. And then you've also got other stuff like Bran.
Yep.
So Battle Cry is triggering twice. That means that, you know, Twilight Guardian, that effect happens twice. Antique Healbot, you know, you restore 16. So there's some really interesting combos in here to play with. Yeah, kind of a tricky deck to pilot. But I mean, that kind of goes for a lot of the you know, the handlock style Warlock decks.
Yep.
You know, you have to know them pretty inside and out because there's a lot of kind of complex decisions to be made, which I'm not particularly good at making, so I'm not going to claim that I am.
Yeah, and well, I'm not particularly good at facing off against because I've definitely played against this deck before.
And you just don't see the Malygos turn coming?
I do not see it coming.
Yep. Yep, I mean, that's the thing is, like, just when you think you're getting a handle on Hearthstone, League of Explorers shifts everything up, and you've got to try and navigate through really complicated waters all over again. All right, so we're back to another Shaman list here.
Yep.
And this is Luffy's Aggro Overload Shaman deck. And so this is just all about face damage, basically. So you've got Lightning Bolts, Rock Biter Weapon, you've got Crackle, you've got Lava Burst, you've got Doom Hammer, which again can be paired with Rock Biter Weapon for 10 burst damage a turn. But then you've also got like this Overload idea, so you've got Tunnel Trog to kind of try and, that's your 1-drop, and then you play Overload cards and build him up. Lava Shock can unlock the overloaded mana crystals. So there's a lot of kind of overload cards in here. There's a lot of just burst cards in here. So this is another one that you just really not too worried about the board state. You're just trying to get your opponent low enough, their health low enough that you can finish them off with spells or Doom Hammer.
Cool.
So yeah, so this one's kind of in here just because of Sir Finley.
Right. Primarily.
Because there've always been variations of these spell-heavy shaman, like aggressive shaman decks, but Blizzard's gradually trying to get the kind of overload mechanics to work a bit better. So I mean, Tunnel Trog's new as well, I should say. So there's a bit of a mix of kind of a slight evolution of the overload being a bit more valuable, but then also the fact that shaman can now switch to another hero power is a really big deal.
It's actually huge.
Because in the past, what you'd have to do is, I mean, your hero power is useless unless you're running like Flame Tongue Totems or Bloodlust, things that can kind of capitalize on having your totems on the board. But in a deck like this, you don't want to be wasting two mana to get a random totem that may or may not help you at all. You know, because you may not be drawing into the cards that work with them.
So if you don't draw to Finley, does that kind of make, I mean, essentially that makes your hero power somewhat redundant?
Yeah, but the good thing is look at this, like,
it's such low cost cards.
Yeah, there's a 5 mana card, but everything else is 3 or below.
Yeah.
So you're always going to have stuff to play. I think Sir Finley, you view that as like a massive bonus because you can play it, either get the ability to tap, Warlock ability to get more cards in your hand, or you switch to a ping class.
Yep.
So you can be like basically just doing that extra point of damage, or 2 if you're Hunter per turn. I mean, Hunter is just ridiculous because the Hunter hero power puts people on a clock anyway. But with this many spells in here, It's over the top. So yeah, kind of like aggro is just not really my playstyle.
Yeah.
I much prefer control, even though I think I spend too long trying to control the board, and rather than just because you got to kill your opponent at some point.
I'm the same. I've discovered that aggro, I'm too. It's not in my natural. I prefer to play things safe.
Yeah,
like
well,
it's not my
even
natural
safe. It's more just like it's you see it as a battle of kind of intelligence or something,
Yeah.
rather than just like ignoring their minions and just hitting them in the face. I should say, by the way, that this deck list or this archetype is actually considered top tier at the moment.
Right.
So I don't know if you know the esports team Tempo Storm, but they basically do a meta report each week where they kind of list out here are the top tier decks, here are next tier down, and this one in the most recent one that I looked at least was in the top tier, which is interesting.
Relatively simple one to build as well in comparison to some of the others. I mean, a lot of these cards, there are no, apart from Sophinle, there are no legendaries.
Yeah.
So
relatively low cost.
Relatively low cost.
Yep. All right, next up, this is this is an archetype kind of in the works.
Right.
So this isn't a very effective list right now, but what's interesting about it is that there's always been variations of like a tempo rogue style in and around Hearthstone, but it's never really been hugely popular. But people are kind of trying to bring it back, right? And the idea with it is that it's a bit like Zoo. It aims to control the board. It aims to make favorable trades by buffing your minions. And it's about just, setting up ball control early on and then switching to face damage at some point after you've, controlled the early game.
Yeah.
And the deck, the card that kind of makes this like a viable idea again is Unearthed Raptor. So you can copy a Death Rattle effect. So it's kind of like a tempo rogue / Death Rattle rogue. So you want to have enough cards in here with Death Rattles that you'd want to copy to make, because 3 mana 3/4 is like a very strong minion to begin with. They're the stats that you would expect, but then if you can get a good Death Rattle copy on top of that, then you're really laughing.
Yeah.
But yeah, so it's just kind of interesting to see like a very minion-heavy rogue archetype potentially coming back. So that's why I've included this. And I've also included, which we'll get to in a minute, Miracle Rogue being back. And of course, like Oil Rogue is still around, but that's a bit more spell-heavy. So this is like a minion-heavy one, and then Miracle, which we'll look at in a second, is like a lot of spells.
Right.
In fact, we might just go to that right now. So Miracle Rogue was one of the most frustrating decks in Hearthstone. It was one of the hardest decks to pilot.
Yeah.
But it was very, very, very effective in the right hands. And then eventually Blizzard made a couple of changes that just made it far less viable. So the old version of the deck ran Leroy Jenkins for burst damage, because back then Leroy was like a 4 mana card. It was like cheaper than it is now. And Gadget Zone Auctioneer was a 5 mana card.
Right.
So they were the two kind of crucial changes that meant that it wasn't really viable anymore. But the basic idea was you would get to the point where you could play your Gadget Zone Auctioneer, because whenever you cast a spell on top of that, you draw a card.
Yep.
And Rogue has a lot of very, very cheap cards. And it also has cards like Prep, which reduce the cost of spell cards. So what you'd do is you'd play Gadget Zone, and then you'd like, maybe play a Backstab, maybe Prep, or you could wait till turn 6 or 7, actually, I should say, because you want to get off, you want to basically draw through as much of your deck as possible. But then cards like Conceal would allow you to hide your Gadget Zone Auctioneer, so unless they have like AoE that does 4 damage or more, it's going to survive to the next turn. Then you can just play more spells and just draw through your entire deck. And so the basic idea was that you would get to this Gadget Zone turn and just basically draw through your deck and get all the combo pieces you need. And you play Leroy Jenkins, and you'd like cold blood it.
Yeah.
and just hit them in the face, or you would Shadow Step it a couple of times.
Right.
Because I don't think Shadow Step's even in this version. But Shadow Step basically let you play it out, hit your opponent in the face, bring him back to your hand. He costs less to play again. Play him out, hit your opponent in the face, bring him back to your hand, play him out, hit your opponent in the face.
Right.
So it was this incredible burst damage. It was just kind of what Blizzard's been trying to get away from with Hearthstone, which is why they nerfed it. But yeah, so Miracle is back in a slightly different form, and it's thanks largely to this new card, Tomb Pillager, which adds a coin to your hand.
Cool. And
so that's a combo enabler, it's a gadget sand enabler. The idea is kind of the same in that you're drawing through your deck, but the kind of combo, the burst combo is a little bit different because it's... where are we? Huh. So I'm not sure where this deck list went wrong, but as far as I understand, it's missing... This is the only one I haven't tried.
Right.
So you'll have to forgive me.
That's all right. That's fine.
But I'm pretty sure it's missing its key combo piece, which is actually South Sea Deckhand.
Okay.
So it has charge while you have a weapon equipped.
Yep.
And so the idea is that you play that out, and then you cold-blood it, and then you faceless manipulate it. So there's the burst damage is coming from a different place, but the idea remains the same, which is to draw through your deck, get your combo pieces together, and then hit for a lot of damage on one turn. But yeah, this is a deck that I've kind of put in here because it's interesting that it's coming back, but it's not like I'm just not very good with Rogue in general because it's very particular type of class to play, and you just have to have really good knowledge of the ins and outs of the deck and the deck list, and I just haven't really got that, to be honest.
And neither do I.
Yeah. And then the last one, I've actually got a couple of Control Priest deck lists here, and I got Brian Kibler's one because it's fun because he's got at least Starseeker in here, which is the other kind of legendary from the League of Explorers set, where you get the golden monkey, and then if you draw that, then you can change all your cards in your hand and in your deck into legendaries.
Okay, so that's what the golden monkey is, because
No, the golden monkey is like it's just another card.
Oh.
And you play that for 2 mana.
Right.
And then that shuffles another card. Oh, sorry, yeah, you're right. So it's a map to the golden monkey.
Yep.
And then you play that, and then you draw the golden monkey, and then when you play that. So it's like a 3-step process.
Because, yeah, I've definitely played against this card multiple times, but no one that I've played against yet has drawn the golden monkey.
Right.
So...
Yeah, because the thing is, it's a fine card for its mana cost.
Yeah. It's just like a generally good card with the added bonus of potentially setting
in the current
amazing wheels
in the current metagame, where games go really long and often go to fatigue, it's much more likely that you're going to get to that 3rd step. So I've played this deck a bunch of times because I just really like Priest in general.
Yep.
And I've activated this power a few times, and it's cool. It really just depends on what you've got in your hand and what the state of the game is when you have the opportunity to turn all your cards into legendary cards. Because if you think about it, you're turning all your cards into minions. So if you need to be removing stuff from the board with spells, that's not necessarily something that you want to do.
Yeah.
But if you're ahead, then on average, the legendaries that suddenly appear in your hand are going to be way stronger than the other things you had. And with Priest, which is very kind of combo driven, you may have some just kind of combo pieces, or you've got reactive cards in your hand that you're waiting to use in the right situation, and just transforming them into legendaries, a lot of the time is going to be really good for you. But yeah, it's kind of cool to see Control Priest back, because for a while there, after the Grand Tournament expansion, it was very much all about Dragon Priest,
right? Which
was strong, but just not that exciting, I would say. Like, I enjoyed playing it, but Control Priest is cool because it's just there's so many little tricks you can pull off. Like, the old Control Priest was very, very reactive.
Right.
So you would have very little to proactively do. all the cards in your hand would be like, I can steal this minion of yours, I can kill that minion of yours, and so you're just reacting to what your opponent's doing, and so you're kind of perpetually behind. You're just waiting for a way to just get the board and snowball from there. But it's good to have stuff to do in the early game. So this list is a little bit like that, a little bit better actually, I should say, because you've got Zombie Chow 1. Museum Curator is an excellent new addition to the Priest arsenal. Not only is it just something to do on turn 2, but discovering a Death Rattle card can net you. It's just always a good choice.
Yeah.
You can get stuff like Sludge Belchers.
Right.
So you can get very strong minions just off this. And what it can also mean is that if you're not too sure like what your turn 3 and turn 4 looks like, you can be actively trying to kind of fill in your curve. So for instance, if you can pull a Dark Cultist on turn 2 out of a Museum Curator, then that's obviously a good turn 3 play.
Yeah, that's amazing.
Then you've got cards like Death Lord, which are basically in there to protect you against aggro, because you're not too worried about giving them a free minion when it dies, because it's not going to be necessarily a high cost minion. But Death Lord can obviously work against you in a pretty severe way if you're playing against the control deck, and then they suddenly have Ragnaros or something on the board when they kill it.
Or Equality.
Yeah, and they can just get rid of it very, very easily, and then who knows what's going to come out. But there are some kind of classic combos in here, like you've got Akanai Soul Priest and Circle of Healing to just do 4 AoE damage. You've got Akanai Soul Priest and Flash Heal to do 5 damage, so that can be used to take out enemy minions. It can be used for face damage for a little bit of burst, or if you just play that without your Akanai, obviously, you can heal yourself back up to try and stay in the game. So that's a very, very versatile card. And then you just got fun stuff like Wild Pyromancer just combos with like all the spells in here wonderfully. You get an extra bit of damage off your Holy Nova, extra bit of damage off some of your other spells. And Entomb is the other. You've got Excavated Evil's new, I should say, but Entomb is in this meta is awesome because it basically lets you pluck an enemy minion off the board and put it in your deck. So if you're going to go to Fatigue, guess what? You're going to draw that card at some point, guaranteed. And it means that you negate its Death Rattle. So if they play, let's just say they play a Sylvanas, you take the Sylvanas. There's no, you have to spend 6 mana to do it, obviously.
I was going to say that's quite a steep price.
A lot of Priest's removal are expensive, and they're rarely going to leave you enough mana to do anything else on that turn. So, it's still, I think you have to be really good at Priest to win, to have a high win rate with this deck.
Yeah.
But it is a fun deck to play. And just to give you an idea, and also, once you play Justicar, and you're healing for 4 per turn, again, if you're going to Fatigue, you can just heal so much using Justicar.
Yep.
And if you play her on turn 10, you can heal yourself first for 2, play her, and then heal yourself again for 4. So you can heal yourself for 6 on the turn you play her if you play her on 10.
She's an amazing card just because, that is a high cost, that is a high attack with such a great benefit as well.
Yeah, it's not a bad card to be playing. If you're behind on the board, she's going to die pretty cheaply.
Yeah.
But, that's there's still upside there. So this is another Control Priest list, and I don't know if you noticed, but that previous one was missing one of the kind of key cards from, just Priest decks in general, which is Injured Blade Master. Mm-hmm. And so in that deck, your Circle of Healing would be used in conjunction with Akanai to clear your opponent's board, or in conjunction with Northshire Cleric to net you a bunch of cards. But it's always cool having Injured Blade Master because it means that your Circle of Healing can go either way.
Right.
So you can play Injured Blade Master on 3 and then Circle of Healing and heal him back up to 7 health.
Yeah.
Which means he's very, very difficult to get rid of.
3 cost card with 4 and 7.
Exactly. It's a combo, so obviously anytime you're reliant on having more than one card in your hand, it's not something that you should rely on. But the idea is that there's enough kind of early game combos that you can build pieces together for here that you're always going to have something that you can kind of proactively do.
Yep.
And then instead of having Flash Heal, this deck runs Light of the Naru. So you can combo that with Injured Blade Master, and then because he's still damaged, you summon a Light Warden, and then you can start buffing the Light Warden's attack up. And you can also use the Light of the Naru, obviously, with Akanai to finish off enemy minions, do face damage, and then you still get the Light Warden, especially if you hit them in the face, and because they're still alive, they're just damaged. So yeah, this is like kind of similar, but it's got a Cabal Shadow Priest. That's like an old control card that isn't in Kibler's list. Only one Entomb, and then Sylvanas is in there, Vol'jin's in there. So just a slightly different and a Thought Seal. So a slightly different kind of take on it, but still featuring a lot of those new cards. So that's kind of some of the kind of older archetypes that have returned and some of the newer archetypes that people are currently playing. There's a lot more to talk about with each of these lists, obviously, but this is, I think, it's just meant to be a bit of an overview.
No, thank you so much, Cam. I've actually learnt a lot, and I am going to go back and pause this video on each deck and build these, because they all look like a hell of a lot of fun. And as I said, I've just been playing the one, so it's time that I start broadening my horizons. I think.
Yep.
Post League of Explorers. But that's wonderful, and thank you.
No worries.
I am pleased that Hearthstone continues to evolve in this crazy kind of way.
Yep.
And for everything else Hearthstone, stick with IGN.
Bye.
Bye.